If there's one thing that the varied and argumentative gaming community can agree on, it's that grinding is kinda the worst. It's the one thing that without fail sucks the fun out of once enjoyable games or acts as a barrier in the way of fun experiences. Grinding is the act of doing one thing over and over again, seemingly forever, until what used to be engaging becomes a job you don't get paid for. I was having a fun time with replaying Torchlight 2, but after a while, not even 30 minutes in, battles began to drag on and I felt like I was just kinda going through the motions. I'd hit the point where I was grinding and I'd stopped having fun. It would be all too easy to describe Torchlight 2 as a grindy game, to point at it and say, oh look at this, you just do the same thing over and over again, how boring. But I know from experience that I've definitely had fun with the game. Those 44 hours I had accumulated with it prior to 2018 were really fun, and that's when it hit me. We as non-designers think about grinding in a way that isn't really conducive to good discussion or to good gameplay. See, pretty much any game can be described as grindy from the right perspective. Fortnite? Oh, you just run around for ages collecting resources and guns and you don't do anything for 95% of the game. Total grind. Pfft. Megaman? Oh, it's just jump and shoot, all the bosses are the same. Lame. And XCOM? I mean, where do I even start with this? Every mission is pretty much identical, none of the choices you make matter. Pfft, why do I even love this series so much? Alright, so I'm kinda taking the piss there, but there is some truth to it. We think of grinding as a game mechanic, something that happens to the player, but really, grinding is all in our heads. It's a state of mind, not a state of gameplay. Think about the times when you felt grinding at its worst. I can guarantee you that two things were happening. First, you weren't immediately enjoying the game, but second, you kept playing under the promise of the game being fun again at some point in the future. Take the most obvious kind of grind, that of XP grinding in RPGs. We'll get back to why I'm using Pokemon as an example later. Killing weak, easy enemies is kind of dull, there's always no thought that goes into it. However, the reason why you're doing it is so that you can get up to a level that allows you to actually progress in the game, in this case leveling up my team of crappy Pokemon to actually stand a chance against the early trainers. It might not have been fun, but without farming some wild Pokemon I'd never have stood a chance to play the game at all. And that's kind of the crux of the issue. Humans love to optimize things and, well, doing one thing over and over again is usually going to be optimal. The challenge posed to designers then is how to avoid steering players into the waiting arms of grinding and to keep their games fun for as long as possible. This can be achieved in three ways: by making the game juicier, by making it more challenging, and by breaking it up into smaller chunks. Let's start with the first, juiciness. Juice is sometimes called game feel by people who like to use vague language to sound sophisticated, but all it really means is how satisfying a game is to play on a tactile level. The undisputed masters of this are Vlambeer, who have made nothing but pretty samey games that are infinitely replayable thanks to some awesome audiovisual feedback. Here's like 15 seconds of footage from Nuclear Throne and tell me this doesn't feel awesome. Yeah! Nuclear Throne requires you to trudge through the same areas with the same small pool of guns, fighting the same enemies countless times, but the screen shake, explosions, rocky music, and general atmosphere get the endorphins flowing so hard you barely even notice. Simply processing the audiovisual feast on display distracts your brain and keeps you from entering the dreaded grinding game state. Another way to keep players engaged is to make your game more challenging. That doesn't necessarily mean harder. A more challenging game has a high skill ceiling, meaning that there are lots of opportunities to improve your player every turn, stopping gameplay from becoming a slog. At the risk of singing this game's praises too much, Into the Breach and other similar strategy games are great for this. Players are always going to be trying to optimize games, but grinding only really sets in when a player can no longer improve and the game becomes routine. Into the Breach is deliberately almost impossible to completely optimize, tempting the player to try again to see if they can go just that little bit further. Maybe that building can be saved, maybe you can get that second star, the solution could be just a reset away. In addition to having a bunch of opportunities to improve your understanding, Into the Breach remains accessible by splitting its gameplay into small chunks. A large part of the frustrations we usually associate with grinding are to do with doing the same thing over and over again, which ultimately stems from a lack of observable progress. Minit is a game that sees your progress more or less reset every 60 seconds, forcing you to repeat yourself. But the fact that with every iteration you can make measurable progress towards success through your understanding of the game and a growing collection of items, repeating yourself never really feels that bad. It's for the same reasons that more and more people are stealing RPG experience bars so as to give people an immediate feeling of progression when doing otherwise mundane things, even outside of video games. This gamification can be seen everywhere. In the language learning app Duolingo, completing a lesson on, say, French fills up a little experience bar and maybe even rewards you with one of these little achievements. These add-ons don't actually mean much, but they give you a nice little rush of endorphins that encourages you to keep coming back without feeling like what you're doing is a chore. Do these little gamey additions to Duolingo actually help you to learn French? Well, allow me to demonstrate. Nein, tu es nicht, es ist wirklich sehr schlecht. These three methods are a great way to increase the long-term playability of a game. But is there any game where we can see all three being used at once? You bet. Stardew Valley. Stardew Valley is an enigma. On the face of it, it seems like a game that would fall prey to grinding almost immediately. Every day you do mostly the same sort of stuff, there's no big complex story, and it's trivially easy to at least succeed. I thought I'd get about a week in and then get bored and give up. Little did I know that the game would get its hooks into me big time. Which is weird because pretty much all there is to do in Stardew Valley is farm items, pun intended. But it seems that Eric Barone, aka Concerned Ape, has really got an understanding of how to keep a player invested. Let's go through those three techniques and take a look at how Stardew uses them. Firstly, juice. Now, Stardew doesn't exactly have the crazy bombastic effects of a Van Beer game, but despite that, it's still got excellent sound design. You might think that watering plants is boring, and you'd be right, but Stardew makes it immensely satisfying. When you do, the plants shake a little, you see the ground change colour, and you get this awesomely satisfying little sound effect. It's not much, but these crisp, meaty sounding effects really do add a touch of feedback for doing chores that makes them, well, less of a chore. The soundtrack, as you can also no doubt hear, is relaxing and chill to the point that it eases you into a zen-like trance where you can just kind of slide into the flow state. If I was capable of anything but a state of 100% tension at all times, I'd say it was very relaxing. Next up, difficulty. You'll recall how I said it was easy to succeed in Stardew, and it is. Pretty much everything in the game is insanely profitable. The real challenge lies in completing the game under the soft time limit of 2 years. After 2 years, your grandfather appears and judges you from beyond the grave! His criteria are stuff like getting married, having a big house, making a lot of money, donating a lot of items to the museum, stuff like that. But the big thing to do is to complete all of the community centre bundles. Making money in Stardew is pretty easy, but the community centre means that you have to explore every facet of the game in order to complete it. You've got to catch a bunch of fish, raise nearly every animal, go foraging, go mining, and farm some of the more tricky or rare produces in order to complete it all, often on a seasonal time limit. This completely changes the game, and I found myself planning in-game weeks in advance to squeeze everything out I needed to do, working around changes in the weather, the town's local events, and the cycle of crop harvests in order to get everything done. Which brings me nicely onto the point of division. Every day in Stardew Valley brings with it two things: opportunities and progress. Things are designed in such a way so that you'll always start the day with a set of goals, and then end with you having made meaningful progress towards the end game of getting a good grandpa rating. Maybe it'll be raining and you won't have to water your crops, leaving much more time to catch some rare fish. You might need some ore, which necessitates a trip to the dangerous mines. Maybe it'll be someone's birthday, letting you get a big step up on their affection meter if you've been paying attention to their dialogue. You can also spend an entire day planning out and planting a fresh haul of crops, or it might be a special town event, which often have rare and powerful items up for grabs. All of these things are short-term goals, but they all have long-term implications as you slowly work your way up the exponential growth curve of your farm's development. The fact that you're able to achieve small goals every in-game day means that the final one isn't nearly as daunting, and also that you can quit whenever you like and still feel like you've made some meaningful progress, rather than being compelled to continue past the point of fun. Perhaps the most susceptible kind of game to grinding is MMOs, precisely because you're dealing with the game for hours at a time. World of Warcraft's changes to how its leveling works over the years have been really interesting, because they've made the game much more playable without really changing the core mechanics. First and most notably is that they've made each class and spec much more active. Where previously the game was mostly all about strictly optimised damage rotations, now nearly every class has randomised ability procs, cool flashy effects, and some sort of gimmick to keep things interesting. For example, an arcane mage can build up charge that means they'll deal more damage, but makes their spells less efficient. Unholy Death Knights get to control a small army of zombies, and balanced druids get to turn into a terrifying chicken monster. I have no idea why. This philosophy extends to quests. Now, nearly every MMORPG actually only has 4 quests: kill something, go somewhere, find something or interact with something, but over time WoW has gotten better at spicing these things up. Even if you're still killing 10 dudes, framing it as an assault on a castle, or the lead up to a Pigman Royal Rumble, or as part of some sort of weird stealth mission, really gives it the extra juice I needed to not get totally bored.
An illusion? What are you hiding?
The fact that you can level pretty much any way you like as of a recent patch is a really good change too, and it means that you don't have to abandon an area you really like simply because it's inefficient to stay. These are all great fixes, because it's very hard to eliminate grinding entirely from certain genres. Take Pokemon and RPGs. In some of the more recent games, they buffed the EXP share item to give your entire team experience regardless of whether they are in the battle or not. This means that your team ends up vastly overleveled, and regular gameplay becomes just as easy and simplistic as grinding would be, which kinda defeats the point. Of course, this is all kind of ignoring the elephant in the room. Because grinding exists solely within the mind of the player, it's yet another weapon in the arsenal of less ethical developers. The most obvious example is that of loot boxes, card packs, or whatever you want to call them. By forcing you to grind for an inordinate amount of time to get what you want by deliberately making the game unsatisfying, easily optimised and with no clear steps to realise your endgame, the prospect of paying real money to skip it becomes more enticing. Now, I'm no Jim Sterling, so I won't bore you with a rant about how loot boxes are evil, but we do need to keep in mind that grinding isn't just the result of game design negligence, it can also be the fault of games deliberately trying to take advantage of you. Which really makes it all the more important for us to change the way we view grinding. If you're not having fun playing a game, it's not enough to chalk it up to grinding and keep playing. We need to look at why we're not having fun, what our goal is, and if it's still worth playing, or are we just doing it out of a misplaced sense of obligation. In the case of Torchlight, it was because I'd seen it all before. When a game has no more surprises, the juice and challenge in particular just aren't going to be as effective. There are so many great games out there that know how to get around grinding, that wasting time on a game that doesn't respect yours is probably not a good call. Grinding is different for everyone, but if we work towards understanding and beating it, we'll have more games like Stardew Valley, and fewer games that are deliberately not fun. And isn't that a goal that's worth working towards? Ooh, okay. It's been a little while since I've done one of these update things, but I think it's about time. What the hell? Where did all you guys come from? I've taken a short break after the Nier Automata vid because turns out doing an hour-long video is a bit exhausting, and then suddenly my sub count triples. Thanks for subscribing, I guess. We are now well and truly over the threshold of how big I thought the channel could ever possibly get, and yeah, it's quite cool that people apparently like my stuff. You know there are other people out there who do this, right? Yeah, so the aforementioned break is now well and truly over, so a regular upload schedule of roughly twice a month, give or take, should be resuming, so I guess stay tuned for that. If you want to share my stuff, like this video, or the older ones, even though they're doing quite well now, you know, more the merrier, if you want to do that, then that'd be the best way to help me achieve my ultimate dream of one day selling out completely and pissing away what little creative integrity I have. So if you could do that, that'd be great. There is some more cool stuff in the pipeline that I would tell you about, but I don't know what it is, so you're just gonna have to stay tuned for that. Yeah, I never know how to finish these, but bye!